Have you ever sat at dinner, twirling your fork around and thought, yeah, this little guy? Totally harmless. Well, not so fast. Once upon a time, using a fork could literally get you labeled as a sinner. Yep, you heard that right. A straight up God offending rebel, just for picking up a piece of metal with prongs. Back in the day, Europeans were hardcore about eating with their hands. Like, hands or nothing, bro. Knives? Fine. Spoons? Cool. But forks? Nah. Forks were seen as weird, foreign, and honestly, kinda insulting to tradition. And if you dared to whip out your fancy fork at the dinner table, people would stare at you like you just declared war on common decency. Wild, right? Stick around, because today we're diving into the scandalous, holy war level drama behind the simple, innocent little fork. You'll never look at your dinner table the same way again. All right, so let's rewind a bit. Back in medieval Europe, we're talking like 1,000 years ago, dinner time looked very different. Picture this: a giant wooden table, a bunch of sweaty dudes in tunics, and absolutely zero forks in sight. Instead, it was all about the hands. Big roasted meats, rip it apart. Hearty stews, scoop it up with bread. Porridge, just slurp it straight from the bowl, bro. And honestly, people thought it was the natural way to eat. Like, why complicate things? If you were fancy, you might carry a personal knife. Not for fighting, well, okay, maybe sometimes, but mainly for stabbing hunks of meat off a communal plate. Sharing knives? Totally normal. Sharing bowls? Also normal. Germs? Pfft. Medieval folks were playing life on hard mode. They didn't even know germs were a thing. Now, here's the funny part. Spoons were kind of respected. Spoons were cool. Need to ladle some soup? Scoop some honey? Respect the spoon, my dude. But forks? Forks were seen as totally extra. Like, ugh, why are you making eating so complicated? And it wasn't just a vibe thing. It was deeply cultural. Eating with your hands was tied to tradition, humility, and good old-fashioned values. You know that feeling when you see someone using a selfie stick at a restaurant and you just cringe a little? Yeah, that's how medieval Europeans felt about forks. Forks were the medieval selfie stick. They weren't just unnecessary, they were showy, weird, and honestly, kind of suspicious. Because remember, back then anything new or too fancy instantly made people side-eye you. If you pulled out a fork, you weren't just being weird. You were basically screaming, "Look at me, I'm better than you." So yeah, no forks. Hands, knives, bread. Maybe a spoon if you were classy. That was the vibe for hundreds of years. And honestly, I respect it. Medieval people were eating with vibes and violence, and somehow it worked. So, everything's rolling along just fine in medieval Europe. People are ripping chicken legs with their bare hands, double dipping into stews, living their best messy lives. And then, boom, enter the fork. Not just any fork, though. The fancy, shiny, two-pronged forks brought over by some seriously stylish folks from the Byzantine Empire, mainly princesses and noble women. Yeah, blame the princesses. These women showed up at royal banquets in Italy like, "Oh, darling, you still use your fingers? How quaint." Then they'd casually whip out these delicate little golden forks, twirl them through their food, and eat without touching anything. To the medieval Italians, it was like watching someone invent teleportation. People were shook. They were like, what the actual witchcraft is this? And of course, because it's medieval times, you already know the church had opinions. Big ones. Religious leaders started ranting that using a fork was an insult to God's design. If God gave you hands, why on earth would you need a tiny metal claw to eat your food? There was even this famous case, no joke, where a Byzantine princess married into Italian nobility. And at her wedding feast, she used a fork, and everyone lost their minds. Like full-on scandal. People accused her of being proud, sinful, and basically flipping the bird, pun intended, at good Christian values. Spoiler alert, she died a few years later of illness. And guess what the priests said? It's because she used that evil fork. I'm not even kidding. In their minds, she literally offended God so badly with her tiny golden fork that she got cursed. Wild times, man. Imagine being so scared of cutlery that you think it's a one-way ticket to divine punishment. But honestly, when you think about it, the outrage wasn't really about the fork, right? It was about change. People were terrified that these little metal tools symbolized everything they feared: new ideas, fancy foreign habits, loss of good old traditions. It wasn't just, you weird fork. It was existential dread with a side of roasted duck. Humans are funny like that. Even today, people freak out over every tiny change: new tech, new trends, new ways of living. The fork? It was just the medieval version of TikTok. So after all the drama, you'd think forks would get canceled forever, right? Nope. Turns out, forks were about to pull the ultimate comeback. Starting in Italy, yeah, the same Italy that once freaked out, the wealthy elites slowly started warming up to forks. At first, it was just the ultra-rich, super extra types. You know, the ones who were like, if it's not covered in gold leaf and served on a silver plate, I'm not eating it. For them, forks weren't just for eating. Forks were a flex. Like, look at me. I'm so sophisticated, I don't even touch my food anymore. Big, I'm better than you energy. It didn't hurt that during the Renaissance, everybody was obsessed with art, beauty, and showing off how cultured they were. Suddenly, dainty eating was fashionable. Having grease all over your hands? So, last century, by the 1600s, forks were popping up in France, the capital of being extra. And once French nobles started using them, you already know the trend went viral faster than a cat video. Soon, having a fork at the table became a sign you were classy, cultured, and probably way too good for peasant life. It wasn't just a rich person thing anymore either. Middle-class folks started copying the upper class because, let's be real, everyone loves looking a little bougie at dinner. Over time, forks evolved too. Two prongs turned into three and then four. Shapes got sleeker, handles got fancier. They made forks specifically for different foods: fish forks, dessert forks, salad forks. Because why stab your steak with a basic fork when you could stab it with style, right? Eventually, by the 18th and 19th centuries, forks were everywhere in Europe and America. By then, using your hands to eat at a fancy dinner wasn't just frowned upon. It was basically social suicide. Oh, you're still hand-feeding yourself like a caveman? Cute. The fork wasn't just a tool anymore. It was the official badge of civilization. From banned to bougie, from cursed to classy, the fork had officially made it. Talk about the ultimate revenge arc. So next time you're sitting at a table, spinning your fork around while waiting for your fries or whatever, just remember, you're holding a piece of revolution. Not just a tool for stabbing pasta. Not just a cute accessory to your dinner, but a tiny, shiny symbol of rebellion, drama, and the absolute chaos of human history. A fork, a literal fork. Once so scandalous, people thought it was the devil's utensil. Now, we casually toss them into fast food bags without even thinking. Wild. It kind of makes you wonder, what everyday thing we take for granted today is going to blow people's minds a few hundred years from now? Maybe our phones, maybe our air fryers, maybe fidget spinners. Okay, maybe not fidget spinners. History's weird like that. Small things today, big deals tomorrow. And sometimes, it all starts with just a fork. And hey, what other everyday object do you think has a totally wild history behind it? Drop your guesses in the comments. I might just dig into it in a future episode. If you're into these hidden stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive.